do. Wherefore, finding him so fit for his purpose, he preferred him, and made him next to the great Lord Will-be-will, of whom we have written so much before. Now the Lord Will-be-will, being in those days very well pleased with him, and with his achievements, gave him his daughter, the Lady Fear-nothing, to wife. Now of my Lady Fear-nothing did this Mr. Self-conceit beget this gentleman, Mr. Carnal Security. Wherefore, there being then in man's soul those strange kinds of mixtures, it was hard for them in some cases to find out who were natives, who not, for Mr. Carnal Security sprang from my Lord Will-be-will by mother's side, though he had for his father a Diabolonian by nature. Well, this Carnal Security took much after his father and mother. He was self-conceited, he feared nothing, he was also a very busy man. Nothing of news, nothing of doctrine, nothing of alteration or talk of alteration could at any time be on foot in man's soul, but be sure Mr. Carnal Security would be at the head or tail of it. But, to be sure, he would decline those that he deemed the weakest, and stood always with them in his way of standing, that he supposed was the strongest side. Now when Shaddai the mighty and Emmanuel his son made war upon man's soul, to take it, this Mr. Carnal Security was then in town, and was a great doer among the people, encouraging them in their rebellion, putting them upon hardening themselves in their resisting the king's forces. But when he saw that the town of Mansoul was taken and converted to the use of the glorious Prince Emmanuel, and when he also saw what was become of Diabolus, and how he was unroosted and made to quit the castle in the greatest contempt and scorn, and that the town of Mansoul was well lined with captains, engines of war, and men, and also provision, what doth he but slyly wheel about also? And as he had served Diabolus against the good prince, so he feigned that he would serve the prince against his foes. And having got some little smattering of Emmanuel's things by the end, being bold, he ventures himself into the company of the townsmen, and attempts also to chat among them. Now he knew that the power and strength of the town of Mansoul was great, and that it could not but be pleasing to the people, if he cried up their might and their glory. Wherefore he beginneth his tale with the power and strength of man's soul, and affirmed that it was impregnable, now magnifying their captains and their slings and their rams, then crying up their fortifications and strongholds, and lastly the assurances that they had from their prince, that man's soul should be happy for ever. But when he saw that some of the men of the town were tickled and taken with his discourse, he makes it his business, and, walking from street to street, house to house, and man to man, he at last brought man's soul to dance after his pipe, and to grow almost as carnally secure as himself. So from talking they went to feasting, and from feasting to sporting, and to some other matters. Now Emmanuel was yet in the town of Mansoul, and he wisely observed their doings. My Lord Mayor, my Lord Will-be-will, and Mr. Recorder were also all taken with the words of this tattling Diabolonian gentleman, forgetting that their prince had given them warning before, to take heed that they were not beguiled with any Diabolonian sleight. He had further told them that the security of the now flourishing town of Mansoul did not so much lie in her present fortifications and force, as in her so using of what she had, as might oblige her Emmanuel to abide within her castle. For the right doctrine of Emmanuel was, that the town of Mansoul should take heed that they forgot not his father's love and his; also that they should so demean themselves as to continue to keep themselves therein. Now this was not the way to do it, namely, to fall in love with one of the Diabolonians, and with such an one too as Mr. Carnal Security was, and to be led up and down by the nose by him. They should have heard their prince, feared their prince, loved their prince, and have stoned this naughty pack to death, and took care to have walked in the ways of their prince's prescribing, for then should their peace have been as a river, when their righteousness had been like the waves of the sea. Now when Emmanuel perceived that through the policy of Mr. Carnal Security the hearts of the men of Mansoul were chilled and abated in their practical love to him, first he bemoans them and condoles their state with the secretary, saying, "Oh, that my people had hearkened unto me, and that Mansoul had walked in my ways! I would have fed them with the finest of the wheat, and with honey out of the rock would I have sustained them." This done, he said in his heart, "I will return to the court and go to my place, till Mansoul shall consider and acknowledge their offence." And he did so. And the cause and manner of his going away from them was, that man's soul declined him, as is manifest in these particulars. 1. They left off their former way of visiting him. They came not to his royal palace as afore. 2. They did not regard nor yet take notice that he came or came not to visit them. 3. The love feast that had wont to be between their prince and them, though he made them still and called them to them, yet they neglected to come to them, or to be delighted with them. 4. They waited not for his counsels, but began to be headstrong and confident in themselves, concluding that now they were strong and invincible, and that man's soul was secure, and beyond all reach of the foe, and that her state must needs be unalterable for ever. Now, as was said, Emmanuel, perceiving that by the craft of Mr. Carnal Security the town of man's soul was taken off from their dependence upon him, and upon his father by him, and set upon what by them was bestowed upon it, he first, as I said, bemoaned their state. Then he used means to make them understand that the way they went on in was dangerous, for he sent my lord High Secretary to them, to forbid them such ways. But twice when he came to them, he found them at dinner in Mr. Carnal Security's parlour, and perceiving also that they were not willing to reason about matters concerning their good, he took grief and went his way. The which when he had told to the Prince Emmanuel, he took offence, and was grieved also, and so made provision to return to his father's court. Now the methods of his withdrawing, as I was saying before, were thus. 1. Even while he was yet with them in man's soul, he kept himself close, and more retired than formerly. 2. His speech was not now, if he came in their company, so pleasant and familiar as formerly. 3. Nor did he, as in times past, send to man's soul from his table those dainty bits which he was wont to do. 4. Nor when they came to visit him, as now and then they would he be so easily spoken with as they found him to be in times past. They might now knock once, yea, twice, but he would seem not at all to regard them, whereas formerly at the sound of their feet he would up and run, and meet them half-way, and take them too, and lay them in his bosom. But thus Emmanuel carried it now, and by this his carriage he sought to make them bethink themselves, and return to him. But alas, they did not consider, they did not know his ways, they regarded not, they were not troubled with these, nor with the true remembrance of former favours. Wherefore what does he but in private manner withdraw himself, first from his palace, then to the gate of the town, and so away from man's soul he goes, till they should acknowledge their offence, and more earnestly seek his face. Mr. God's peace also laid down his commission, and would for the present act no longer in the town of man's soul. Thus they walked contrary to him, and he again, by way of retaliation, walked contrary to them. But alas, by this time they were so hardened in their way, and had so drunk in the doctrine of Mr. Carnal Security, that the departing of their prince touched them not, nor was he remembered by them when gone, and so, of consequence, his absence not condoled by them. Now there was a day wherein this old gentleman, Mr. Carnal Security, did again make a feast for the town of man's soul. And there was at that time in the town one Mr. Godly Fear, one now but little set by, though formerly one of great request. This man, old Carnal Security, had a mind, if possible, to gull, and debauch, and abuse, as he did the rest, and therefore he now bids him to the feast with his neighbours. So the day being come, they prepare, and he goes and appears with the rest of the guests. And being all set at the table, they did eat and drink, and were merry, even all but this one man. For Mr. Godly Fear sat like a stranger, and did neither eat nor was merry. The which, when Mr. Carnal Security perceived, he presently addressed himself in a speech thus to him. "Mr. Godly Fear, are you not well? You seem to be ill of body or mind, or both. I have a cordial of Mr. Forget-Good's making, the which, sir, if you will take a dram of, I hope it may make you bonny and blithe, and so make you more fit for us, feasting companions." Unto whom the good old gentleman discreetly replied, "Sir, I thank you for all things courteous and civil, but for your cordial I have no list thereto, but a word to the natives of man's soul. You, the elders and